The man who's trying to get the Save America Act passed in the Senate is the Senate Majority Leader John Thune. He joins us tonight. Senator, thanks for doing this.
Good to be with you. Thanks, Brad.
You're now on the bill. Where is this? Where does it stand at this moment?
We're on it. We took the House-passed bill, which had basically the two provisions that would require you to prove citizenship in order to register to vote, and then you'd have to show an ID when you actually vote. And that came over in the form of a message, which enables us here in the Senate to get on that at 51 votes. Typically, it would be 60. We'd have to have cloture on the motion to proceed. But we're on the bill, and we're going to be debating it for the next few days, and we'll see how long after.
But you're pessimistic that you're going to get the votes needed to pass this bill.
Well, I'm pessimistic because I'm always pessimistic that Democrats are actually going to come to their senses and do what common sense would dictate they do, and that is support this. I mean, these are things that are supported broadly across Americans of all political parties, including Democrats. But we would need, in order to pass it in the Senate, 60 votes. And that means that we're going to have a certain number, at least of Democrats. And maybe during the course of the debate, they'll be won over. I'm not saying that can't happen, but I'm saying I have to be prepared at some point, that this is going to come to a conclusion. But I think what we wanted to do is put them on the record, force them to defend a position which we think is indefensible, particularly where the American people are on this. So it'll be a freewheeling debate on the floor, and in the end, we'll see if the Democrats come around and deliver some votes.
But you know the frustration here. You have head counters that look
Right.
at the votes, and if you bring this to the floor and knowing it can't clear 60 votes, you're not willing to kind of vote procedurally to change the rules to pass it, then is this, legislating, or are you kind of just messaging for the election?
Well, it's legislating. I mean, actually, if you look at the substance of the policy, this is about safe and secure and elections in this country, and making sure that we have an election process that is actually with the right people, not just the illegals who are in this country have an opportunity to vote. We want to make sure that if you're in this country, you have to be a citizen of this country actually to exercise and cast your vote. So I think that's a fairly simple position, and one that Democrats ought to eventually get on board with. But if they don't, it's obviously an issue that we will be able to use, I think, in the fall elections. But so it has politics around it, but this is a goal is to achieve a policy outcome, and that is to try and get a requirement in law that in federal elections that you would have to be a citizen in order to register to vote, and you'd have to show an ID in order to vote in our elections.
And there's no way to split it up, to do pieces of it. Is there any way any piece of this could get passed to 60 votes?
Well, we'll see. I mean, we're looking at how to do that. There are other pieces of the Save America Act in addition to those two. Those are the two that passed the House. The president has also introduced the idea of mail-in voting, and so we've got some reforms and modifications to that. There's also the issue of whether or not biological males ought to be able to compete in girls' sports. There is the transgender surgery issue. Those are all issues on which I think most Americans, at least if they're Americans who are applying common sense, vote for and support in very big numbers. The only folks who don't support it, appears at least at the moment, are Democrats in the Senate. But we'll see if that changes over the course of time. What I've said all along, Brett, is that what we will do is we will guarantee a debate on this issue. Obviously, it's a big priority for the president. There are a lot of people across the country who want to see this voted on, and we will guarantee a vote at the end of that, and we'll see where people stand.
I don't want to dwell on this too much, but some of your colleagues say the talking filibuster is the way to go. Here's the Utah Republican Senator Mike Lee.
This is something that 85% of the American people want. So if a small handful of Democratic lawmakers want to interfere with the will of the American people, let them earn it. Make them speak, make them stand on the Senate floor and explain why in front of all the American people. They won't last very long. This is something that we can do without changing a single rule or a single precedent. And it's something that we must do in this instance.
So why in specific detail are you convinced that a talking filibuster doesn't work?
Well, first off and foremost, because we don't have the votes for it. And that's it's a simple function of the math in the Senate. It would take even a talking filibuster, it would take 51 votes. We don't have 51 votes for that in the United States Senate.
But why is that? Why
Well,
are
I mean, I think-
Republican colleagues not going to force the issue? The president's obviously putting his foot here, saying this is the most important thing that needs to come out of this Congress.
Right, and I know people don't like to hear this, but the talking filibuster, you know, it takes you back kind of basically to the 1800s. You go back to the 19th century and the way things were done in the Senate. And we can't find an example in modern Senate history where a piece of legislation passed via the talking filibuster. But in the meantime, what it does
But he
do is
would say if they got tired and exhausted, it would be 51 votes.
it would be at 51 votes, but between now and then, and you're talking about unlimited debate, and any time an amendment, for example, is offered and fails, if it gets tabled, you start all over, you reset the clock. And it really favors the minority. When Harry Reid was the majority leader, Democrat leader in the Senate, same thing with Chuck Schumer, they both looked at doing this and opted against it. What it would force us to do in the Senate is vote on all kinds of Democrat amendments, whether it's Epstein or blocking President Trump's tariffs, or Obamacare subsidies. You can go right down the list. War powers, abortion. There are a whole bunch of votes that would be that we would be forced to take. Not only really hard political votes for a lot of our colleagues, but also votes that in the end, some of which would pass and go on the bill. And once issues like that are attached to this bill,
It's a poison pill.
It's a poison pill. So we've looked at, believe me, we've shopped this out, we've gamed it out, we've done all the contingencies and said, is there a way in the end that we can get an outcome? Because to me, that's what it's about. If you can achieve a policy outcome, yeah, then the process we're willing to look at. But in the end, this is about really having a debate about the substance. And the substance of this bill is whether or not people who are in this country illegally, non-citizens, ought to be able to vote in American elections.
The other side of this argument says if Democrats take control, they are taking out the filibuster.
Right.
There's just a sense that they sing from the same sheet of music. They vote a lot together, much more than Republicans do. Why, on this issue, even narrowly, can't you do that?
Well, the legislative filibuster, as distinct from the talking filibuster, we don't have the votes for either. We don't have the votes for the talking filibuster, but the legislative filibuster, we really don't have the votes. I mean, that
Because
is
you lose like 5 or 6 Republicans?
Oh, way more than that. On a legislative filibuster right now, I mean, I don't want to handicap it here on the public, but that is a very deeply held view by a lot of Senate Republicans that if the Democrats want to go there, if at some point they decide they want to steal the car, fine, but we're not going to hand them the keys to do it. And then own all the things that we would enable, all the things the Democrats want to do once they nuke the filibuster. But again, that's a hypothetical. We don't know that it'll happen. If they get the majorities in the House and the Senate and the White House at some point in the future, maybe they go down that path. We don't know for sure. But I know that right now there are a majority of Republican senators who don't want to go down that path.
So tell me if this scenario is wrong. You let the Senate debate this bill for a few days. You file cloture, which essentially kills it because you don't have the 60 votes. You then clear the floor for the confirmation of Mark Wayne Mullen as Homeland Security Secretary. And then, is that the goal?
Well, we'll get to Mark Wayne, and that'll, he'll have his hearing tomorrow. Hopefully he gets reported out of the committee on Thursday. We will try and pivot to him on the floor on Monday next week. But we won't be done with this bill probably at that point. I mean, this rules very well could roll through the weekend, could roll into next week. We'll have debates on it. At some point, we will come to a conclusion, and then we'll find out where everybody is. But they will be at 60-vote thresholds, absent some, effort by Republican senators to nuke the filibuster, which, like I said, just based on the math, is not going to happen. So we're talking about 60-vote thresholds. The question is, are there Democrats in the course of this debate who could be persuaded, along with their constituents, who I said overwhelmingly agree with this position, to come out and support actually requiring people to be citizens to vote in our elections?
I mean, some of them said the mail-in thing is a non-starter for them. There's some Republicans who are saying that.
Right, and we've worked on that issue. In fact, we made some modifications as recently as last night in conjunction with the White House. That's an issue that's really important to the president. And there are parts of mail-in balloting that are just rife with fraud. Ballot harvesting, drop boxes, unsolicited mailing. If there's a big difference between if I write a letter and say I'm a registered vote here, and I prove that with an ID and request a ballot, as opposed to them just being shipped out there to everybody and nobody knows who at these residences is picking up and voting. I think that there are real issues when it comes to mail-in balloting, And the president's insistent that we address it. And I think the legislation that we have in front of us now, working with our states, many of whom do rely heavily on mail-in balloting, including South Dakota, that we do it in a way that gets after the fraud, gets after the abuse of some of these policies, but also protects the validity of a state to enable people to vote who need to vote and who are legitimate voters.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.